Now, David Crisafulli is the opposition leader in Queensland. He voted against the voluntary assisted dying laws, the euthanasia laws, and he joins us now to have a chat about that decision. David, I disagree with your vote, but I want to hear why you decided to make it.
Paul, I respect your opinion, and I did consult widely and I genuinely reflected on it. If I had to boil it down to three issues, the first is the one that you just played in your clip. I'm deeply concerned in Queensland that our palliative care funding is so small, and the Australian Medical Association in their report showed effectively you've got 3 months of palliative care funding, but you can make a decision to end your life from 12 months. That pits Queenslanders against each other. So if you can't afford that pain relief for up to 9 months, someone can make a decision that's vastly different to someone who does have money. And I'm not comfortable with that. The second one is the ability for institutions to object. And I believe that if you believe in choice, and the bill was about choice, well, that choice should also exist for an institution to say, I'm not comfortable with it. And the third, and the one that didn't get enough coverage in my mind, there's a provision in the bill that if somebody seeks to change somebody's mind, there's a jail term of up to 7 years. Now, I understand a jail term for trying to convince someone to take their life, but I'm not convinced that trying to convince someone out of it is worthy of a jail term. So there were three things that I felt particularly uncomfortable about.
Yeah, the third's a really interesting one. I too had not heard that in the coverage. Tell us about the carve-outs that the government were floating versus what the reality of the bill is. At one point in time, there was a discussion about a faith-based organisation wouldn't have to be compelled, but my understandings are they're not going to make that change. Where are the hard and fasts here, and where are the carve-outs?
We've put forward what we think are some pretty reasonable amendments. Time will tell tomorrow whether or not any of those get accepted, but based on the mutterings, I don't think there will be. You're right, there was talk that the Premier had flagged the opportunity of some amendments, but it was taken to Cabinet and that didn't happen. Look, if it's a true conscience vote, matters don't go to Cabinet. And I said when I became the leader of the party, I was intent on reforming the party and creating a centre-right political movement. Now, at the core of that is the ability on matters of life or death for it to be a conscience vote. And my troops made that free from the heavy hand of me. It wasn't follow the leader. I wasn't out in the press heavying people, saying that this was a big election issue. Others did that. I didn't. The first time my troops knew how I was going to vote is when I stood up in that building and made that statement. That's what leadership looks like on a conscience vote. You either have them or you have party votes. But if you're going to have a free vote, every individual should be entitled to cast their vote. And in my case, I did so having genuinely reflected and looked a hell of a lot at that legislation. And I didn't want to waste my vote. I wanted to be serious about it. And I genuinely looked at each and every line, and I looked at the submissions, and I couldn't in good conscience support it based on some of those anomalies.
Yeah, now obviously the question will be, and I would hope that it doesn't become politically weaponised, but I do want to ask, if you got to the position of winning an election and becoming Premier, would you change the legislation holus bolus to remove it, or would you seek to improve it when you had the opportunity to form a government?
Well, my actions show that I'll never campaign on it and I won't make it an issue. And matters of life or death shouldn't be a political issue. And I'm going to call it for as it is, Paul. Before the last election, the Premier all of a sudden made this an issue in the middle of the campaign and said that it had to be dealt with by February because it was such an important issue. The Law Reform Commission wasn't even reporting back until March. After the election, that all disappeared, and here we are many months later. You'll never get me politicising matters of life or death. You will never get me forcing people to follow my lead and voting one way or another. That's at the cornerstone of the Westminster tradition. I am a traditionalist. Now, there is a role, and there's a big role, for party votes and cabinet solidarity, but it's not for matters of life and death. People should have the right to be able to look at it, whatever the bill is, and they should be able to consider it free from the dead hand of leadership. And that people have seen that, and I hope they see in me a leadership style that does respect tradition.
Yep, you're a good man. Good to have this conversation. Look forward to many more in the next little while.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Good on you, David.